Good morning, everyone. This is lecture 4, and today we will talk about designing and writing applications. And we're talking about web applications. This is the agenda for today's presentation. If you recall, we started with very basic structures: loop, sequence, selections, and we said that those three are building blocks for your business logic. And then we discuss modules, which is basically grouping some instructions that are doing similar task. Today we will look at the main line logical flow, which is we can call it main program, through which you will be calling your modules, okay, through which you will achieve the overall functionality to achieve the business objectives through that application. We will try to understand the need for good programming design and its advantages as well. And we will also look in great deal of detail about web application development, testing, and deployment environment. So, especially in web application, we have different environments applications go through. Okay, so we look at them each of them in fair bit of detail. And what are the core features that most of web applications which are being developed today would have, and what are the best rules or best practices we need to follow when we develop these web applications. Before going to them, I will just introduce to you the application framework. The way last time I introduced you PHP, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So this is again some preliminary knowledge that will help you to understand these concepts in better detail. Okay, so you must have heard of conceptual framework, theoretical framework, enterprise architectural framework. So what does this framework tell us? Why we use this word? What we want to tell the people when we talk about frameworks, when we use framework word along with some other things. What does it mean? What is a framework? Sorry? Like a line? Sorry, I didn't get it. Spell it. A set of rules, yeah. Set of rules. Sorry. So set of rules that can guide you how to do something. Okay, when we say conceptual framework, so it basically provides a conceptual layout how things would be configured. For example, when we say architecture, it's component and their configuration and so on. So when we say application framework, especially in programming, it is a partial application. Okay. In a last lecture before that, I showed you .NET framework. If you recall, on the top layer was languages, and I told you that more than 20 languages are being supported by .NET framework. And then we had web forms and window forms. That was second layer. Then we also had a layer of ADO.NET. There was a common language runtime layer, and so on. So frameworks are basically partial application on the top of which you can build your own application. Okay, so they are the partial applications that provides you capability to quickly develop your own application. Why we need these frameworks? Now today, most of the applications which we see, they are basically dynamic in nature. They are not static web pages. They are dynamic in nature. They are reading the data from certain sources, and especially in today's lab, you will be reading data from a database. So whenever dynamic page has to read something from the database, it needs to perform some functions. Like first of all, connect to the database. Which database they want to connect? They need to mention the IP address, username, password, and the database name. So these things are required to connect to a database. Once a database is selected, then you have to identify what tables you need in order to read the data. Okay. Once you are able to identify the tables, again through query you do that, you will receive the results, and then you use the results in your application. In today's lab you will be doing this. So these things are very much similar no matter what sort of applications you build in order to realize your business logic. So why we should be repeating these steps again and again and again and again? What you can do in one project, you can define one module that can do this task, and you can repeat that module, okay, in your application. But In future you will be developing many other applications. Then you can develop a library and you can use that library. Okay. But it's not like that these are steps being repeated. There would be some other functionality in the web application that is also getting repeated. Every web application have these forms, and these forms would need, for example, validation. So you can have some classes that can provide you easy way of doing validation. So in short, there are many things which are being repeated. We don't want to repeat that code again and again and again. And frameworks can help us to overcome that issue. Okay. For example, specific in this case, we can use a framework that can help us that basically provide all these functionalities from step 4 to step 5. Or what we need to do only in this case when we are using framework, we just need to configure the framework with our application. We just need to provide some basic information to the framework that this is a database we want to connect, this is a server name, this is the admin user and password. That's it. And then we can use the data depending upon our requirements. Okay. So frameworks are very helpful in this regard. Depending upon languages, there are many frameworks available. For example, we are using .NET framework. Okay. And you see there are many packages available which you can reuse. Bootstrap is another framework that is for building a very intuitive graphical user interfaces, and I will show you in a couple of minutes. So this is a framework, some predefined functionality, you can use it. PHP, code igniters, and these are frameworks built in PHP language. So if you are developing some application and you want to use framework, these are some frameworks you can use. I have uploaded one YouTube video on the Blackboard that also provide more information about the frameworks, especially PHP frameworks. So this is something you are trying to reuse. Same concept, the way we develop modules. Modules were very limited functionality. The frameworks basically covered a broader horizon. So frameworks providing us functionality, basically we are reusing functionality. Same thing is basically a library provide us. So the objective of using libraries and frameworks is similar. We are trying to reuse the code. So what is the difference between these two? Why we use different terminologies, framework and libraries? What's the difference? What do you think? Or there's no difference at all? Okay, go ahead. Have a try.
In a framework, I guess that if code sits at the top of the framework, whereas the libraries are more a part of your main code.
Yep. Yeah, when you use framework, this picture basically differentiates them very well. When you basically use a framework, you are building on top of the framework and you need to follow certain rules. You can use this code to create your classes, your packages, but you cannot access this code directly. There is hierarchy you need to follow. This is basic functionality. Using this functionality, another layer is being built. Using the second layer, third layer is being built. So in layers, functionality is being enhanced. The bottom layer would be very generic, that can be reused for many purposes, and the top layer will be more specialized that application can make use of. So this is layered architecture. This is well defined rules that need to be followed in order for you to make use of that framework. Whereas in case of library, it is not like that. In library provides you functionality, but your code can hook up all those libraries. Okay, you don't need to follow certain hierarchical framework in order to make use of to build your application. So if you need a library to basically generate PDF files, you can look for a library, you can include it. You need library to parse some video streaming, you can use you can identify that library and can use it in your code. Okay, but in case of framework, it's not like that. You have to use, for example, extend. Do you know object-oriented programming in which we have inheritance? Okay, all of you know inheritance. Okay, so inheritance, you can extend existing classes. So classes will be defined over here, and you can extend those classes, and all the functionality that is in parent classes will be available in child classes as well. So you can create specialized classes in order to achieve certain functionality. So this is the major difference between libraries and code. So why use framework? It is not mandatory to use a framework. In your assessments, second assessment, you will be, although you're using .NET framework, but you can build your applications without framework as well. For example, in case of PHP, I mentioned to you Code Igniter, Zend. These are the frameworks that are available, but you don't need them compulsory in order to build your application. For example, your assessment 1. You can build your application from scratch using PHP language. You don't need something codified in the form of framework in PHP to build your application. Then why we use them? Yeah, reusability. It basically, these are the tools that help you to speed up your programming. As I mentioned on the first slide, there are many talks that are prefixed that the logic is prefixed. We know how to do them. Okay, these are the steps we need to do. This is how we connect with the database. This is how we read information from the database. This is how we iterate through a data set and so on. Those steps are predefined. So we can provide abstraction to the user and codify within the framework the details how to do that. So it basically helps you to increase the performance of your development.
It's kind of like we were talking about last week. We're saying the modules, where
Yep.
you know the modules will work. Yep. So if you're using a framework, you know that the stuff they give you works.
Yeah. So frameworks, again, they are being utilized to build many projects, many web applications. If there's a framework which is very famous, being used by many applications, then reliability is there. You know, the framework will be secure as well because many companies are using it. So this not only increase the speed and development, but it also brings in the reliability, performance as well. And we will see that in a couple of seconds as well. So there are many advantages associated with it. And one of the advantages, it basically increases your pace of development. And this is what we require being a developer. We want to finish the projects as soon as possible. Another advantage is when we have these frameworks, we don't need to bother about these details, how to connect to the database, how to retrieve the result. So then we can focus on the business logic itself. If I need to design certain algorithm that needs to calculate forex, depending upon forex rate, certain financial transactions need to be made, or to predict something, how bank should basically move the money among branches. So I can focus on that business logic rather than how to interact with the database, how to retrieve information, how to connect to the ATM and so on. So you can focus on business logic that is pertinent to some specific scenario you want to achieve. So this is another advantage. And when you are using these frameworks, you are forced to follow certain structure. You are forced to follow certain rules. Because if you don't follow them, you cannot use the framework. So you have to put some pressure on you, and you have to follow certain guidelines, rules in order to make use of those frameworks. And once you do follow that structure, then it's easily maintainable. All the specialized classes which you have created, you know, those are the things you need to update. You don't need to go to framework to update anything. Okay. And if a framework got updated, there some certain updates are available. You can apply those updates to the framework. Your specialized classes don't need any updation. So it increase the maintenance become very easy. So upgradability be quite easy in this case. And helps to handle very complex problems in a better fashion. Have you heard of design patterns? So design patterns, again, recurring problem, and you know how to solve that problem. And once you know how to solve the problem, then you can codify that in a framework so that whomsoever want to address that problem, he can use this design pattern. So this also improves better handling certain complex situations. We all know that in web forms it's quite possible that we need to get a lot of information from the user. And if user submit the form and some error comes, he needs to go back to the form again. And if applications does not provide functionality of repopulating, then user has to add each and everything again. So this is a big hassle. So framework can provide you automatic validation and repopulation of the form. You don't need to do anything. You just need to define, I need these 5 fields, and you can check the properties like validation, this format, and auto populate, yes, that's it. And framework will do rest of the things for you. Framework will repopulate each and everything in a form. If user got some error and it's going back to the previous page, framework can get those things loaded again. Security. SQL injections are quite common in web applications. So do you know what are they? SQL injections, what are they?
So SQL, so putting in SQL functions or calls into the text box of a web application.
Yeah, and what's the purpose?
To put information into the database so that, malicious code into the database, so then when everyone else gets the data from the database, they get the malicious code.
So hackers can basically hack your database through SQL injection. We all know that we need to connect to the database to read the data. Okay, and if that connection is not secured, if the query string that is sent to the database that has some malicious command, and the application is not able to identify that this command is malicious and execute that command in the database, it may result in the loss of information. Let me show you a video first and then. Okay, so this tells basically about SQL injections. Come on. Let me try, otherwise I will open the web page. Oh, it's not playing. Okay, let me. Sorry. Give me a second.